September 1st, 2013. A new month is upon us, and that of course means that an old month has just ended. So I thought it would be prudent if we began this video with the monthly charts. If you pay attention to the financial media, and you should with just a grain of salt, just very little sort of in the background. I don't think it's something you should really spend too much time on, but if you've been paying any attention as of late, you would have noticed that they've been saying that this month of September here was the worst month since May of 2012. That is obviously true. Here's the May 2012 bar, and here is the August 2013 bar. So it was relatively bearish, but what we're going to do is we're going to look at these monthlies first and then look at the dailies and see where I believe the market's going to support relatively soon. You can obviously see it here on the monthly itself, but it'll be clearer when we get into the dailies. So relatively bearish month. Again, we did just kind of ride up at the top of the channel here on the monthly before failing. Let's look at DJI. I would say a little bit more bearish of a candle on the Dow. You could look at this as bearish engulfment, meaning I think we do see lower prices in September just because of the way the bar is. I would not think that we would not at least go somewhat lower than the low of this monthly bar, given that it is a big body with extension to the downside. You can see historically whenever there's a large body and you close close to the low, the chances are you probably go a little bit lower. So I am expecting some more bearishness. NASDAQ Composite, not very bearish really. If you look at it, the size of the bar was not very big at all. You didn't even sell off into the middle of the range of July, which I think is pretty interesting that you're in terms of the disparity between the NASDAQ and the S&P and Dow. Look at the NASDAQ 100, same thing. So tech stocks still pretty strong. Notice that the NDX only sold off right to the breakout point to the top, and last but not least the Russell, which had a bearish month, but again not as bearish as the S&P and the Dow. So just that small piece of information right there should have you thinking that if everything's not being sold, it's not that bearish out there yet, although I do think there's some lower prices coming. So that being said, we're going to take a look at S&Ps on the daily, and I think that the key support here that's going to be important is actually this low here. It's a little bit, I'm going to put it on the weekly here. You can see it possibly a little bit clearer. I'll get rid of this. That would be trend line 1. Nope, there you go. Channel 1 actually. We are quickly approaching the midpoint of the channel. That might be it. This is basically what I wanted to show you in terms of the support that's coming up, is that notice that here and here and here we found support at the midpoint of the channel. That would put the market only down to 1615. That's on the weekly. If you look on the daily, this support here I think is key because it's going to tie in right with the bottom of the channel. The bottom of the channel will obviously move up a bit. We know that a lot of futures contracts are traded in this area. This would be considered what's called a high volume node. As we get closer to this point, I don't know if that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, or even if it does get down there, I may show you a composite profile chart, which I don't have on this machine here, but I can show you how there's a lot of futures contracts traded here. Very often those areas act as magnets, so this could be a possibility as well. But before the S&P gets down there, it's got to come to the midpoint of the channel, which could easily support. All right. That being said, let's look at some trade ideas that could be of use to you, since I do think the market's going to come in a little bit, and thus far I have yet to see any real heavy selling that's really strong. I'll just take you back to Spider once. This day right here, I was away for a short bit, but this day was pretty strong to the downside. But notice that since then, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday here have failed to follow through on that. But it is more of kind of a balance after a move down. So I think that if prices can move below that low, then you would see more of a draft to the downside. But that being said, there really hasn't been anything in here that's indicative of just outright panic selling or everybody dumping their shares at once. And the divergence between the NDX and the S&P and the Dow, I think, is the proof of that, as I showed you earlier. Hold on, let's see why this is waiting for data. Is the fact that if you look at the NASDAQ 100, you have very little breakdown here at all. Whereas if you look at the S&P, right, it's well below that 50 MA, that red line and the green line but there's very little happening to the downside really in the NDX. So I think all of this kind of bodes well for another bounce at some point, whether it's at that midpoint of the channel or the low end of the channel. So in the spirit of that, I am still on the lookout for essentially long plays when they come into support levels. So I'm going to give you a brief list here that I have of some stuff that I think is going to be good coming up. Apple is the first one on the top of the list. I'm watching a 470 area support, really just obvious support off of trend line right in here. And I think that just makes a whole lot of sense coming into the 470 area. Even if it breaks down below that a little bit, you do have the prior highs here, which were an important inflection point. Notice that it was the top of the gap right here. Then you topped again here, you topped again, you topped again, and then rallied through. So that's going to be a very important area. So I would think that 465 to 470 is going to be an important buy point, I think, in Apple for a bounce. Google has fallen out of a channel up here and is now coming down into a more primary channel at the 815 area. If you look on the weekly, right, I'm thinking that if there's more bearishness here, Google would come in right about to this area between approximately 800 and 815. If you follow me on Twitter, and you all should, at Peter Reznicek is my handle. You can see that at the beginning and end of this video. You'll note that earlier this week I was selling 815, 800 ratio spreads, meaning that I am long 815 puts, which are right here, and I am short 2 times that amount of 800 puts, and those were put on for small credits of between 15 cents and 25 cents. You can see that in real time on Twitter. So if we do get more bearishness next week in Google, Google will essentially fall right into my mousetrap, so to speak, and those long puts at 815 will have an immense amount of value, and those 800 puts not so much. So Google, there's the entry point down there. Another one you may be interested in is CME. This is the CME group. Similar to Apple, very simple, just coming into trendline support at the $67 or $68 area. That's Charlie Michael Echo, CME. Foot Locker, support coming up. Look at all this. Chop, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and down again. And now it's coming into an area of support again. I'm going to be watching here at the 31 to 35 area for a buy in Foot Locker. CBOE, which is similar to the CME group, they kind of they're in a similar business. That is going to have support around the 44.50 area on this trend line here. And let's look at a couple others. MasterCard is also coming into a dominant trend line around 600. Would be a buy point around there. And let's see here, Amazon as well, last but not least. Amazon is coming into a trend line support at the 267 area, and you can see there's a lot of congestion on the chart in that area, so I think there would be a playable bounce around that 267. All right, last but not least, Thinkorswim has just recently started quoting and trading VIX futures, and these trade right off of the CBOE VIX index as the underlying, and I think this opens up a lot of opportunities in terms of being able to trade the VIX and not have to use options. There should be some interesting trades coming up. I will be tweeting about VX futures at some point. I have not done a trade in them yet, but seeing that as they just came online with Thinkorswim, I'm going to be watching them for a trade soon. This is going to be something for me at least that I would not be day trading. It would be something I would be looking at for longer term swing trades of like 2 days or so, maybe more. As you can see, volatility tends to act in a very expansion and contraction manner. So I think there's going to be opportunities on, spikes in volatility to short these futures and deep pullbacks to buy them. So just as a heads up, on the Thinkorswim platform, they are now being quoted and tradable. All right. Have a wonderful 3-day weekend. It's good to be back with you guys again. Thanks to Dano from ShadowTrader.net, who was helping me out last week, who kept you guys company while I was away on vacation with the video last week. Have a safe 3-day weekend on behalf of myself and the entire ShadowTrader team here in beautiful Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I wish you good trading and good night.